Abortion is supposed to be about women, right? Healthcare for women, women's rights, and so on. But who truly benefits from abortion? It wouldn't be it wouldn't be men, would it? Well, one author seems to think that that's just the case, and we'll talk about that next. But first, as always, we start with our mission. Always remember, God created us for this time and for this place. If we learn this faith, if we live this faith, if we share this faith, what will the next 100 years look like? Join the mission. Recently, I came across an unusual and unique argument in favor of abortion in an article posted online called "Men Like Me Benefit from Safe Abortion Access." The author presents perhaps the most blatantly honest argument for abortion that I think I've ever read. Now, as I begin my comments, I'm very aware that it is quite common for debates about abortion to quickly devolve into childish arguments and name-calling, especially online. But at the end of the day, keep in mind, I am not an elected official. I do not serve on the Supreme Court. I have no authority whatsoever. I'm just a guy on the internet. And these are just my opinions. Hopefully you can engage my opinions thoughtfully and logically without feeling threatened or devolving into name-calling, just as I will attempt to do the same towards the ideas presented in this article. So to begin with, this article makes a number of presumptions that the typical pro-abortion arguments are actually established facts that are not in any way in dispute. It presumes bodily autonomy is a human right, but by bodily autonomy it specifically means casual, uncommitted sex, in that it ignores the causal relationship between the sexual act and pregnancy. Now, it accomplishes this by treating abortion as a valid form of birth control. He says, "I've viewed accessible abortion as something my partners and I could reasonably rely on as a last resort. That security has informed my approach to sexual exploration and relationships." So you see, there's some circular logic here. Abortion is a human right because if I did not have access to it, I would have to deal with the consequences of my actions. And this creates an alternative reality in which sex does not cause pregnancy so long as abortion is a human right. Now, in this way, the sexual act can then be treated as a recreational activity, what he calls sexual exploration, without any long-term meaning or commitment. It's just a temporary experience of romance for two consenting adults, what some might simply call hedonism. Now, in the interest of keeping this video from getting too long, let's set aside these presumptions for another time and focus our attention on this author's main argument. What I think this author brings to the table that he does that is new and shockingly honest is that he argues that it is men and not just women who benefit from abortion. He says men should be honest about the way that we also benefit from abortion. In this article, he modifies the poverty argument. Historically, it was argued that some women are too poor to have children, so they should first have the opportunity to develop their careers, and then after they have become more established, then they can make the decision whether or not to have children. This author modifies that argument. He applies that argument not to women in poverty and not even to women in general. He applies that argument to men, to himself. He says, "This May, I'll graduate from law school and start my career as a public interest lawyer. A dream come true. At 28, after 10 years of college and multiple graduate schools, in many ways, it feels like my life is about to begin. It would be a terrible time to have a baby. Don't get me wrong, I've always wanted to have kids. I love the relationship I have with my parents, and I can't imagine not getting to experience fatherhood. I think I'd be good at it. That said, I'm not in a relationship, I haven't built a nest egg, and frankly, after 2 years of a global pandemic, I want to eke out and enjoy every last minute of my 20s. So the original argument was that abortion was necessary to help women in poverty, but the women in poverty has now become career-minded men not struggling in poverty, but men who want to build a nest egg. He says, I feel I owe it to myself and my future children to establish a foundation that allows me to be the best dad that I can possibly be. As such, the timing and the circumstances matter. Now, lots of things here jumped out at me. One of those things was the phrase, I want to enjoy every last minute of my 20s. And this jumped out at me because I remember feeling that way myself. I felt that way when I was 28. I wanted to enjoy every last minute of my 20s. But the funny thing is, 10 years later, I felt that same way again when I was 38. I wanted to enjoy every last minute of my 30s. And now, well, 50 is getting closer every day. And guess what? I'm feeling that same thing all over again. I want to enjoy every last minute of my 40s. If I could tell this author one thing, I would like to somehow communicate what age has shown me so that perhaps he could avoid making the same mistakes that I've made. You see, this article seems to place a huge emphasis on experiences. For example, he says he wants to experience fatherhood. He wants to experience every last minute of his 20s. He characterizes sex as sexual exploration. But these experiences, in this case, the pursuit of wealth, of possessions, of success, of a nest egg, as he puts it, of pleasure, the pursuit never ends. It doesn't end when you reach your 30s. It doesn't end when you reach your 40s. It never ends. Because all of us, no matter what age we are, we all want to be happy. And inevitably, we pursue these things because, at least to some degree, we believe that they will help to make us happy. Here I sit in this room that has most recently been used as a YouTube studio, but this room did not begin life that way. Initially, this was a man cave, and on the other side of that camera is what was once a state-of-the-art home entertainment system. And over here, a wall covered with guitars, and this wall is lined with collectibles. And at one time, I was so proud of all of this stuff. These were my treasures. But if you were here now, if you could see the rest of this room, you would laugh at me. Because now, as time has passed, and the TV is outdated and the guitars are broken, I am in fact surrounded by useless junk. Things that when I was in my 20s and my 30s, I thought were priceless treasures. I was so proud of this stuff. I worked hard. I held my head high because I owned this stuff. This room was part of what I called my nest egg. I believed the argument. I believed building this house and filling it with this kind of stuff was a form of responsibility that I owed to my children to give them the most comfortable life that I could provide for them. But now, they laugh at my outdated big screen TV, and they sit in the other room streaming Disney movies on a little device. Now, I'm using this man cave idea to illustrate one aspect of this nest egg argument to make the point that I've learned that this argument, it confuses wealth or comfort with the value of life in general. And if this becomes our measurement of parenthood, that we must wait until we have achieved a certain level of wealth, then the truth is that we will never be ready to be parents because we will never fulfill all of our desires for possessions or for experiences. There will always be one more product to buy. There will always be one more pleasure to experience. The man cave example is good at illustrating this point because no sooner did I achieve all of this that it all became outdated and needed to be upgraded. The VHS tapes needed to be traded in for DVDs and then Blu-rays and then 4K. And now I can just ditch all of this stuff and subscribe to 50 different streaming services. You see, it never ends. These things, they're fleeting and they do not last. And we will never achieve this ideal state by which it becomes proper to have children, which may explain why millennials who were raised with this ideology, this pragmatic utilitarianism, are not getting married or having kids. Because, well, it's just never the right time. And what we lose is those relationships, those people that we could love and that could love us back. The real purpose that we're here, to pass on who we are and to help these little people become who they're supposed to be. It's not to provide them with this stuff, much less create experiences of pleasure for ourselves. This author is brutally honest by attempting to legitimize, without saying it in such crass terms, every college frat boy's morning after rationalization. I like sex. It feels good. But I don't want the responsibility that necessarily comes with it. He admits it himself in the article, saying too often the burden of birth control falls disproportionately on women. Why is that the case? Well, by nature, women get pregnant, and they're not so easily able to wash their hands of what was to this author nothing more than a sexual exploration or an experience between two consenting adults. The reason marriage exists is so that women are not disproportionately burdened with what is supposed to be a gift of themselves to you. I agree with this author in one sense, in that sex is good, but it's not good because it feels good. It's not good because of the experience. You see, that's what distinguishes us from animals. We don't just do things because they feel good. We do things because they lead to a good end. Their object is good. In this case, sex is a loving act between two people who fully and completely give of themselves. But for this author, sex is not the full and complete gift of self, but a temporary recreational activity. What most jumped out at me is this line. The author says, "I've often relied on my female sexual partners to protect me from unwanted pregnancies." And that line, "I've relied on women to protect me," that really jumped out at me. It's obviously backwards. This may be a politically unpopular thing to say, but I'm going to say it. This author dances around it, carefully trying to avoid the obvious. But when a woman has sex with a man, she puts herself and her potential children in a very vulnerable position. That's not a religious statement. That's not a statement of morality. It's a demonstrable fact, a scientific fact. Marriage is supposed to be, to some degree, her assurance that this person she's with has the character and integrity to be trusted with her life and with the lives of her potential children. It's him that's supposed to protect her and any potential children that may come from the act. But this author admits that this abortion culture turns all of this on its head so that the woman must protect the man, protect him from the responsibility that naturally flows from his relationship with her. It sure seems as though this author is arguing that abortion isn't so much about women or healthcare or human rights, but more about enabling a society of frat boys to exploit women. And it reminds me of something I once read in Richard Weaver's book, Ideas Have Consequences. He says, "The spoiled child has not been made to see the relationship between effort and reward. He wants things, but he regards payment as an imposition or as an expression of malice by those who withhold for it. His solution is to abuse those who do not gratify him. He has been exposed so unremittingly to this false interpretation of life that, though we may deplore, we can hardly wonder at the unreasonableness of his demands. He has been given the notion that progress is automatic, and hence he is not prepared to understand impediments, and the right to pursue happiness he has not unnaturally translated into the right to have happiness, like a right to the franchise. The truth is that he has never been brought to see what it means to be a man. That man is the product of discipline and tugging that enable him to grow. This concept left the manuals of education with the advent of Romanticism. This citizen is now the child of indulgent parents, who pamper his appetites and inflate his egotism until he is unfitted for struggle of any kind. None of us are a mistake. Each of us were created by God himself. The scripture says, 'Before I was formed in my mother's womb, you knew me.' This new world doesn't view us this way. It views each of us as a problem that takes up too much space or too many resources. If we are not somehow useful, then it'd be better if we weren't ever born. This new world is a culture of death.